What's going on, everybody? It's me, Jimmy James 59, and I'm coming at you with another Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition tier list. Today, we're going to be looking at the light cavalry line of units. Before we get into the video, let me just say, if you like the content I put out on the channel, if you like this video, feel free to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, so that way you can be notified for all of my future content. I have a lot more tier list planned, and I even have some additional content in the future that we're going to get to as well that should be pretty exciting and informative and to help all of us get better at playing this game that we all love, right? So that's my sellout portion of today's video. Now let's jump into the tier list. The light cavalry line is one of the most popular units in the game, I would say. It is very common to see it. It is a trash unit, which means that it is a unit that costs no gold to train. So it's very common to see them fielded throughout. So I want to introduce us to these units, and that way we can get a sense of where they stand. So the first thing I want to do is look at the Scout Cavalry. Looking at it in the Feudal Age, the unit has 45 hit points, 65 with Bloodlines because Bloodlines adds 20 HP, 5 base damage, 0 base melee armor, and 2 base pierce armor. Speed of 1.2, rate of fire of 2.0, and an attack bonus against monks. I think the big takeaway to see here is that Bloodlines really increases your HP by a lot. Going from 45 to 65, I mean, that's well over a 30% jump in HP. So you're actually getting a lot of value for Bloodlines from this unit. Now, if we go to Castle Age, we take a look at our light cavalry. We see, again, with Bloodlines, you have 80 HP there. Again, pretty significant jump. Not quite as much of a jump as going from 45 to 65, but still, you're giving the unit a lot more value. The base damage comes up to 7, right? So that's an increase. The melee armor and the pierce armor remain the same. Notice the speed on the unit jumps pretty significantly. That's about a plus 25% jump in speed, so that's something that's worth keeping an eye on there. All right, next we're going to keep looking here. Let's take a look at our Hussars, right? So this is the Imperial Age upgrade of the unit. We have 75 base hit points, 95 with the Bloodlines. So again, this is still a pretty nice bump. The base damage remains 7. However, the rate of fire of the attack decreases, which means that it actually attacks faster. So not only are you going to have more HP for this unit, but you are also going to be attacking more quickly. Now, we get into some civilization-specific units that we are going to be included in today's tier list. The Winged Hussar is available only to the Lithuanians and the Poles, and there's some interesting differences to keep in mind here. You're going to get a little bit of extra HP. The base damage increases by 2. The unit has a base melee armor, right, giving it some staying power in those melee fights. And the really notable difference in the bonus attack is you also get +4 attack against gunpowder units. So this is going to give the unit some extra viability against, say, hand cannoneers, perhaps even chasing down conquistadors, right? We haven't seen the Winged Hussar a lot in the scene because, hey, it's only been around for a few months now. But, this is worth noting depending on what the civilization matchups that you're up against are. And finally, what I want to do is I want to take a look at the last one. I want to look at the Magur Hazar. This unit is unique to the Magyars. It's produced from their castle. And we can see, so what this means then is that there's also an elite version. The elite version has up to 105 HP with Bloodlines. It's 90 just with the regular version. The regular version has 9 base attack. The elite has 10. The melee armor and the pierce armor remain the same. Notice the rate of fire is even faster than the Hussar line, so you are going to be getting some good attack from this unit. The real thing to really keep in mind here is the bonus attack. We saw earlier that all of the Scout Cavalry line had an attack bonus against monks. The Magur Hazar does not have that. However, it does have an attack bonus against siege weapons and rams, so Magur Hussars are going to be really effective when it comes to sniping enemy siege. It's kind of a, you might say, a melee version of the Mangadai bonus that the Mongols get. So, as we can see, really interesting units we're going to be looking at, and this yields the characteristics that we're going to be looking at in this video, right? So I always like to think about units through the ages because you play through the ages in the game. I mean, that's kind of the point of Ages of Empires is that, in Age of Empires, you are progressing through the ages and you unlock different technologies as you move through them and use those technologies and units to give you an advantage. So you want to think about how a unit plays in each age as you are judging its abilities. So when we think about the Feudal Age, the scout line in Feudal Age is effective at hunting down skirmishers and even small groups of archers, particularly when these archers in early Feudal Age don't yet have the fletching upgrade from the blacksmith that gives them extra attack and extra range. But that's not all that scouts are good for here. Map control is a big deal, right? So you use your scout to initially look around your base and find resources, but you also use that scout to occupy areas of the map, scout out your opponent's base as well. Now, you can use it to track your opponent's maneuvers, right? So keeping tabs on an opponent's army, knowing what military buildings they're producing, which means knowing what units they want to produce, that can be a very big advantage. Thirdly, finding weaknesses in an opponent's defenses is very important, a very easy trick you can do. If you want to figure out if your opponent's walled, just click inside of the walls, and the scouts, if there is an opening, they will go ahead and find it for you. It's kind of a thoughtless trick that you can do, but it can be very effective if there's a hole in the wall. Now, it is worth knowing that scout cavalry do die easily to infantry. Spearmen are the hard counter to the unit because they have a bonus attack versus cavalry. It is worth knowing that men-at-arms can still be quite effective against Feudal Age scouts. Now, when we get into Castle Age, right, we see that light cavalry is still effective against skirmishers, but will die more easily to crossbowmen. This is true for most civilizations. There are some exceptions, but you start to get hit and run micro with crossbowmen, getting increases to their attack and damage. That can make it pretty problematic to attack crossbows with light cavalry. Now, we saw that there's attack bonus against monks. Light cavalry is probably the best unit for sniping monks, and it can be situationally effective at sniping siege weapons. If you have a good mass of them, it might be worth it to sacrifice 3 or 4 light cavalry to, say, take out a mangonel. Now, it's still worth knowing, light cavalry will die pretty easily to infantry, especially pikemen, but also here you run into heavy cavalry and you run into camels as well, so it can be pretty difficult, we can see, for light cavalry against those units in the Castle Age. Now, in Imperial Age, again, the Hussar unit, right, and light cavalry can be pretty effective at hunting down skirmishers and arbalists, right? Civilizations that have the plate barding armor upgrade and bloodlines are going to be able to do this because plate barding armor gives +2 pierce armor, whereas all of the other blacksmith upgrades for armor are only adding +1 pierce armor. So this is a big jump in pierce armor that we can see. Now, if you can get enough farms and get a good mass of units going, light cavalry raids can be very effective to put really endless pressure on an opponent in games, destroy their economy. You see this all the time, and it's a very effective unit for that. Large masses can very easily snipe siege weapons, so I think we move from being situationally effective to where, you're cranking out a lot of these units, so sacrificing a few of them, say to dive under a castle for a trebuchet, or to take out enemy onagers, is a pretty good investment because you can just create them pretty easily as long as you have the farms to produce them. Again, it's worth noting the units die pretty easily to infantry, heavy cavalry, and camels. So what are we going to be looking at here? Well, we do want to consider whether the civilization has the Hussar. As we saw, it's adding 15 extra HP and a little bit to the rate of fire. It's not the biggest upgrade in some situations. It really matters when it comes to melee fighting. When it comes to, say, fighting, and I should be specific, when it comes to fighting melee fighting that is not against the spear line, right? Fully upgraded Hussars and fully upgraded light cavalry essentially do the same performance against enemy halberdiers. But when it comes, say, to fighting against other light cavalry, or other melee units, that having that Hussar upgrade can be very, very important. And also even being able to raid, right? Absorbing that arrow fire is important. Secondly, Bloodlines. Bloodlines providing that extra HP. This can give you a market advantage in both Feudal, Castle, and Imperial Age. So Bloodlines has a major effect on what your scout line, your light cavalry line, are going to be able to do throughout each age. Next, having plate barding armor. As I mentioned, getting that +2 pierce armor in Imperial Age, that is what allows the unit to really become a good raiding unit and actually be able to close out games. So this is a very important upgrade. We'll look at attack upgrades. In general, we consider viability, right? So this is the intersection, or you might say the interaction between performance and affordability. We'll look at civilization bonuses, and what we're going to do is think about how the unit performs against common enemy units. Many of them we've discussed, but in particular thinking about the spear line, other light cavalry, archers, etc. So with that all being said, right, I think that we're ready to go ahead and jump into the tier list as we get started. Okay, so let's get this thing going. And what we're going to do, well, we're going to start off with the Aztecs. Aztecs are going to find themselves in the F tier. They lack stables. They lack light cavalry. All right, easy decision. All right, next up we have the Berbers. Berbers are going to have to go in the A tier. Your light cavalry line is fully upgraded, and you get a -15 and -20% discount in Castle Age and Imperial Age, respectively. So in Imperial Age, you have the cheapest Hussars in the game. That is very valuable, really helps out the unit. Okay, next up we have the Bohemians. And the Bohemians, sadly, I think they have to go into the D tier. Look, you don't get Bloodlines and you don't get plate barding armor. And what that means is that you just can't raid. Your units are going to die much more easily to Arbalest and Imperial Age. And so it's just not a good unit to tech into. Remember, light cavalry cost 80 food, so you are spending a lot of food to get these units out. All right, next up we have the Britons. Britons are going to go into the D tier because they don't get Hussar and they do lack Bloodlines. However, you do get all other upgrades. Light cavalry are frequently seen with Britons actually because they are a nice complement to the very long-range British Arbalest or Longbowmen. But unfortunately for the Britons, their light cavalry still doesn't quite match up. It's not going to be as effective against melee units, especially, and lacking that Bloodlines is just very important. And again, thinking about how it plays through the ages, it means that you can't say go for all-in scouts in Feudal Age. It means that in Castle Age, your light cavalry are going to lag behind if you have to make them. So, again, because of the impact that lacking Bloodlines has throughout the ages, this is a pretty major downgrade to the British light cavalry line. Okay, next up we have the Bulgarians, and the Bulgarians are going to go into S tier, folks. They're fully upgraded. Their Castle Age technology increases their attack speed by 33%. This makes them the highest damage per second light cavalry in the game, I believe. It might lag a little bit behind the Magur Hazar, but hey, you don't have to make the unit from a castle, and the game actually doesn't tell your opponent if you've researched the upgrade, so you can really take opponents by surprise, and it's good for your light cavalry or your Hussar. Fantastic upgrade, and that bumps them up to S tier. It really helps you kill villagers quickly, kill other units quickly, and that's something you need when you're raiding. All right, next up we have the Burgundians, and the Burgundians are interesting. I think Burgundians belong in the C tier. Your Hussars miss Bloodlines, and as we discussed, the British, they lack the Hussar upgrade entirely. They went down to D tier. I do think missing just Bloodlines, that is enough to get them into the C tier. I would say the other thing about Burgundians is that your stable upgrades are 50% cheaper, and that's very helpful. The light cavalry upgrade is not that expensive, but the Hussar upgrade is 500 food, 600 gold for a normal civilization. That means for Burgundians, you're getting that upgrade much cheaper. That can help out a lot. All right. Next up, we have the Burmese. And the Burmese are going to go in the very interestingly labeled A-B+ tier. The reason I added this section is that I feel like I've said it in almost all of my videos. If I had an A- or a B+ tier, I would put X civilization here. And I decided for this video, let's just go ahead and add it because I think that this tier list needs it because Burmese Hussars are fully upgraded. However, in Imperial Age, they have a new technology that grants their cavalry +5 attack versus archers. This is really important for Burmese because Burmese as a civilization are typically very weak to archers because they lack the Imperial and Castle Age archer armor upgrades at the blacksmith, which means you cannot go skirmishers to counter enemy archer units. And so you're pretty reliant on Hussars if you're not making heavy cavalry already. So +5 attack is very strong. You know, this is really increasing your damage output by a lot. And so while I don't think that this necessarily gets them in the A tier because it's really only helping you in probably what is a late Imperial Age setting, it still is something that is a bit more than being fully upgraded. And so that's really warranting this A-, B+ category. All right, next up we have the Byzantines. Byzantines are missing Bloodlines, and they're also missing Blast Furnace. Those are two pretty significant downgrades. It's very similar to the Burgundians. They're a little bit worse than the Burgundians. So if we were ranking these ordinally within tiers, which I'm not doing, I would definitely put Burgundians ahead of them in that regard because of their cheap, stable technologies. But it's still a decent unit, and it's going to be better than the D tier units here. All right. Speaking of the D tier here, gotta put the Celts in there. You do get Hussars, but you don't get Bloodlines, and you don't get Plate Barding armor. That's a pretty significant downgrade, similar to the Bohemians here, and we gotta slide them down for that. All right, next up, Chinese light cavalry are going to go in the C tier. Your light cavalry are fully upgraded, which means from a performance basis, you are getting a pretty similar unit to, say, a Hussar without Bloodlines in many cases. Again, light cavalry is going to have 80 HP, and a Bloodline-less Hussar is going to have 75. But, the attack rate is a bit quicker for the Hussar, so in the end, I think it washes out. Fully upgraded light cav can be very, very effective, and you do frequently see it with Chinese pairing with their archer units. So very good unit. With Chinese, you are also getting technologies that are a bit cheaper as you go through the ages. Most of the technologies for the cavalry line are not that expensive, but it still is something that helps you out. All right, next up, we have the Cumins. And the Cumins, gotta put them into the A tier. They're fully upgraded. They're +5% faster because you don't get husbandry, but you get a civilization bonus that makes your light cavalry faster. So your scouts are actually faster than enemy scouts, which means you can dictate fights in Feudal Age. You basically are getting husbandry for free in Castle Age, and your Hussars are going to be +5% faster than other Hussars in Imperial Age. And not only that, but you also have a Castle Age technology that's quite cheap called Step Husbandry. That increases the production speed of light cavalry. Very effective for spamming out units. And with Cumins, your stables only cost 100 wood. I would almost go as far to say that this is an S tier unit. I just think it lacks the performance statistics. Man, I really got to think about this. You know what? I think I got to do it. I think on the spot, right? We're going to improvise here. When you just think about all those bonuses, for me, it's the cheap stables combined with Step Husbandry. You can get quite a few stables down, but you actually don't even need as many if you research the tech. That means you can get a lot of Hussars on the field when your opponents can't. Got to give it to them. Well done for the Cumins, S tier. All right, next up we have the Ethiopians. Ethiopians, Gotta go in the D tier. You do get Hussar, but no Bloodlines, no plate parting armor. That's an easy D tier unit. All right, next up we have the Franks. I think Franks. I think Franks can go into the C tier. I'll tell you why. So you do get light cavalry that's fully upgraded, with the exception of the fact that they're 20% extra HP that replaces Bloodlines. It does leave you with only 72 HP, but you do have the chivalry as an Imperial Age tech to crank out light cavalry and really get them massed on the field. This is kind of like their version of steppe husbandry, but it applies to all stable units. But we're only looking at Hussars here. Gosh, I don't know. I think that that's enough to get them into C tier because they do have that effective late game option. But it is worth noting that it's going to lag behind. You know, I think, let me tell you what I actually think keeps this C tier. Your scouts in Feudal Age have an extra 9 HP compared to scouts without Bloodlines, and that can actually allow you to take some really good fights early with Frank scouts and get a good advantage. You have nice civilization bonuses such as free farming upgrades and faster berry collection that enable you to get that Feudal Age. So I would say in Feudal Age, Frank scouts can be quite strong for getting a lead and then holding on to it, because you would switch into knights. So I think that's enough to keep them in C tier. But if you're playing Franks, you do want to keep in mind that as the game goes on, your scouts are really going to lose value and then be pretty deficient in later stages of the game. So C tier, and maybe a B or even a B plus in the early game, but probably closer to a D in the late game. All right, now we can look at the Goths. You know what, Goths, I think we have to put at the C tier. You get Hussars that have all the upgrades except for plate parting armor. That does mean you miss out on quite a bit, but it does mean that basically your cavalry is pretty good. Your light cavalry is good until you get to Imperial Age. It's just not going to be a very strong raiding unit, but you can take some decent melee fights. So I think that's enough for C tier. Okay, next up, Huns. I got to put Huns in the A tier. Fully upgraded. Your stables work 20% faster with Huns. This is their team bonus, and that actually means that you're getting better scout production at all phases of the game: feudal, castle, imperial. That to me, and it's enough to get you to A tier. You have a really nice economic bonus where you don't have to make houses, saving you a lot of wood, allowing you to get farms down to enable that production. Incas, F tier, no stables, no problem. All right, Indians. I think Indians are going to have to go. I think Indians go into the B tier here, but they are probably the weakest of the B tier civs. So you lack plate parting armor with Indians, but in Castle Age and Imperial Age, you gain an extra pierce armor in each age. So what does this mean? This means your light cavalry will actually have extra pierce armor in Castle Age, right? Giving them 5 pierce armor in Castle Age, and actually allows them to take pretty effective fights, even against archer units, right? Very important. And that also means that in Imperial Age, you have all of your pierce armor, and pierce armor is very important for light cavalry. Now, that does mean you are missing a melee armor, so you will lose to fully upgraded Hussars. But aside from that, that's a small downgrade, and you can still perform all of the major functions just as effectively as most fully upgraded Hussars, and you have even a better Castle Age. And so going full light cav in Castle Age can actually be a really nice strategy with Indians. And so I know I've done that in quite a few games that I've played with them, and I know other people have done it as well. And so it's important to keep in mind. I think that keeps them into the B tier. All right, next up, Italians. Fully upgraded Hussars. I think that's going to warrant B tier status. So if you have fully upgraded Hussars, right, B tier, just remember that. Okay, next up, Japanese. Japanese, I think, are a real or a tricky case here. So you have light cavalry, right? You don't get Hussars, and you don't get plate parting armor. Now, you do get Bloodlines, so that means you can have a sneaky good scout rush with Japanese. And because of their economic bonuses, you can get up quickly to do, say, 19 pop, maybe even 18 pop on the current version of Arabia that uses elephants instead of boars, giving you a little bit more food. But because you don't get Hussar, and because you miss plate parting, once you get to Imperial Age, the unit gets really downgraded, and is just not as effective of a raiding unit, and is also not going to be as good in melee as, say, you compare it to, say, Goths, right? Goth Hussars will beat Japanese light cavalry because, well, the only difference between them is one stays light cav and the other stays Hussar. I think that's enough of a difference, actually, because late game fighting can be so important for light cavalry that puts Japanese down in the D tier. All right, when we look at Khmer, I think I gotta put Khmer. Let me think about this for a second. I gotta put Khmer in the A-B+ tier. They're fully upgraded. You have a farming bonus for your civilization. But you also don't need buildings to click up, and you can get some great scout rushes with Khmer and some great fast castle knights. Yeah, you know what? We're gonna go on the fly here again. I didn't have that in my notes, but you can't forget about that. Because of the flexibility of what you can do with Khmer throughout the ages, that's an A-tier unit easily. Because it's only fully upgraded and doesn't have other performance statistics, I do think it can lag a bit behind Bulgarians. The fact that, say, you compare it with Cumins, the extra speed means that you can hunt down units or escape a lot more easily, and you get cheaper stables. So I think that Khmer are actually pretty close. They do play out very well, but I think it lags a little bit behind our S tier here. Okay, next up we have Koreans. Koreans are going to have to go in the F tier, folks. No blast furnace, no plate parting armor, no bloodlines. You're not going nowhere but the F tier. Now contrast that with our Lithuanian friends. Lithuanians, easy S tier. You get the Winged Hussar upgrade, which means you get all those extra stats. You do miss blast furnace, but that means you have the same attack as a regular fully upgraded Hussar. Very strong unit. So you're getting the extra melee, so you're still going to win against Hussars in battle. You're getting the extra HP. This is just a great unit, so easy S tier. And also, I gotta say with Lithuanians, because of the plus 150 food you get at the start, you can get some really, really great scout rushes going, really fast up times. Next up, staying in the S tier, we're going to go with the Magyars here. The Magyars get a cost discount on their light cavalry line, from Feudal Age and beyond. They're fully upgraded. You get your attack upgrades for free, and they have the Magur Hazar, right? So no question, S tier. All right, next up we have the Malay, and Malay, no way when it comes to light cavalry. You only get light cavalry, and you're missing the last two armor upgrades. That's pretty pathetic, so you probably should never go for light cavalry as Malay. All right, next up, we have the Malians. Malians, I have to put in the A tier. You don't get Hussar, but your Imperial Age technology Farimba gives them an extra 5 damage, which gives you 7 plus 7 damage in Imperial Age. That is very strong. So that makes it a great unit in melee combat, and so it's going to be really effective for your army. Might be one of the weaker A tier civs, and I say that just because you are missing a little HP, so it's not quite as good of a raiding unit, right, where survivability is so important, but still really good. The building discount for Malians allows you to save a lot of wood, might be able to allow you to get a few extra stables to crank up production. So still a good unit, but A tier. All right, Mayans, easy F tier. They don't get any stables. All right, next up we have Mongols. I'm going to put Mongols in the A tier, but Mongols are actually kind of tricky because you do get plus 30% more HP on your light cavalry and your Hussars, right? So your scouts are generic. But in Imperial Age, you're missing the last armor upgrade. So you're still not quite as effective as a raiding unit. And you're also not that effective against archers compared to fully upgraded units. Now, The reason why I say that this doesn't bounce Mongols down into A minus is because your scouts also have extra 2 line of sight, which means you can scout your base a lot easier. You can scout your opponent's base really well, and this is also a team bonus, so it will help your allies as well. And it just that vision gives you so much map control. The Mongol hunting bonus also enables you to do some really early feudal age times. So the Mongols, I would say, have an S tier scout rush. And then because their light cavalry are a bit stronger, you have really good light cavalry. I think this is definitely worthy of an A tier. I think it's almost an S tier if they were just a better rating unit. But for balance purposes, that would make them a bit overpowered, and they're already quite strong, so A tier. But it is important to recognize that they do have some limitations. All right, Persians. Persians, fully upgraded, no problems there. The Poles. Poles are very tricky here. I'm going to put Poles in the A tier. I think they're borderline S tier. So you do get Winged Hussar. Their Imperial Age technology gives trample damage to the unit. The Pole scouts do +1 attack against archers, right? Which is a unit that you're already pretty good against, but that does help a little bit. The real problem here is you lack plate barding armor. It's just not an effective rating unit, and that's an important role for the Hussar. And so we got to downgrade it, but it is going to be very effective in melee fighting. And so you don't want to be afraid to use it in that context. Okay, let's keep going. So now we look at the Portuguese. Portuguese going to go into C tier. C tier is going to be fully upgraded like cavalry, right? So you don't have the Hussar, so it's not quite as good, but still pretty decent. All right, Saracens, fully upgraded Hussar, no worries. All right, next up we have the Sicilians, and Sicilians are going to be really interesting. This is another one of our A minus B plus tier units. So let me explain here what we're going to be doing. So Sicilians do get fully upgraded light cavalry, which would normally make them kind of a C tier unit. However, their units take only minus 50% bonus damage, and that helps them in all phases of the game. Fully upgraded scouts can actually take on spearmen from Sicilians. Fully upgraded light cavalry can actually take on pikemen, right? So, and in Imperial Age, this gives your units a lot of survivability against their strongest counter, right? You really, you could put a price on that because you can put a price on everything in Age of Empires. But that is very helpful for you, and it affects all ages of the game. So, you really got to give it to Sicilians here, I think. It's not quite as good as an A tier because, again, it's just fully upgraded light cavalry, but the survivability of the unit, I think, puts it in that interesting in-between category, where it's even better than fully upgraded Hussars because of the way your scouts can actually function. In Feudal Age, you can go something like all-in scouts and be very, very effective with Sicilians in Feudal Age. So the bonus damage for Sicilians does start to taper off in Imperial Age when the bonus damage on, say, camels and halberdiers get very high, but in Feudal Age and Castle Age, it's quite strong. All right, next up on our list we have the Slavs, and we're going to stay in the A minus B plus tier. Slavs have fully upgraded Hussars, which is great. Their farmers work faster, and you're just often with Slavs able to get a lot of food in mid-feudal and in the mid-game, and you can do some really you can create some really big masses of light cavalry that can be frustrating for an opponent. So, gotta put it there. It's a bit better than fully upgraded because the civilization bonus allows you to do things with the unit that other civilizations will struggle to do with the same villager distribution. Spanish are a bit tricky. I'm gonna put Spanish in the B tier for the moment. Units are fully upgraded, and there's no gold cost on your blacksmith upgrades. The reason I don't think this moves them into A minus B plus tier is because of the fact that, well, the gold cost on blacksmith upgrades is not as It's not as much of a killer here. The real gold cost with the light cavalry line that comes into play is actually the Hussar upgrade, and the Spanish have to pay fully for that. Now, something actually, to go back in time a little bit, I didn't mention with the Bulgarians, but it's really important to know that their blacksmith upgrades in comparison, minus 50% food cost, very impactful, right? So, because again, you're spending so much food cranking out Hussars, getting a food cost upgrade is great. And the blacksmith upgrades do cost a lot more food than gold. So the Spanish, I don't think it's enough to move them up a tier, but this would make them perhaps the strongest B tier Hussars in the game. Now, if we look at Tatars, gotta put them into the S tier. You get, with the Castle Age Silk Armor upgrade, +1 melee, +1 pierce armor. That is outstanding for survivability. And you get extra food on your sheep and extra sheep with town centers with Tatars. So you do get a bit of an extra food bump that can, say, facilitate a scout rush or facilitate, say, cranking out a few more light cavalry in Castle Age. But it's really a silk armor. Silk armor is what makes the unit S tier. All right, next up we have the Teutons. Gotta put them in the D tier. You get all the armor upgrades. You get Bloodlines. You get an extra melee armor. In Castle and Imperial Age, what could be wrong? Well, you not only lack Hussar, you lack the light cavalry line, and that just means you're not doing very much damage. It's decent, maybe actually one of the stronger units in D tier, perhaps, but it's just still not a good unit. You just don't have the HP, right? You're stuck at 65 HP, and that's just not going to get it done. All right, next up we have the Turks. Turks, for me, are an easy S tier. You get a free pierce armor from the beginning of the game, right? In Dark Age. This means your scouts are very, very effective against archers in Feudal Age. You can go full light cavalry in Castle Age. Your Hussars will be great at raiding, but here's the thing about Turks. You get free light cavalry line upgrades. So as soon as you get to Castle Age, boom, you got light cav. As soon as you get to Imp, you have Hussar. That's fantastic. All right, so you can do a lot with a Turk light cavalry. It's basically your only trash unit that's good. So Turks, enjoy it while you can. You have a trash unit in the S tier. All right, next up, we have the Vietnamese. And the Vietnamese, I got to put in the C tier. Technically, they're going to be one of the weaker C tier civs because the light cavalry, they don't get Hussar. Their light cavalry is not fully upgraded. You do miss Blast Furnace, but you do get Plate Bard and you get Bloodlines. I think that that's enough to differentiate the unit from the D tier. So Vietnamese light cavalry, C tier. Maybe one of the weaker in C tier, but still pretty good. All right, last and perhaps least, Vikings are going to go in the F tier. You only get light cavalry. You're missing the last armor. You miss Bloodlines. You miss Husbandry. Viking light cavalry, just not very good, right? So really strongly advise not investing very much into it. So with that, that takes us to the end of the tier list, right? And so as you can see, right, the light cavalry line is pretty distributed throughout the game. We have some very good civilizations that have it at the top. And then we have some civilizations where you really want to think twice, but I would say think about the role that it's performing, right? You can easily look at, say, something like Japanese scouts. You can have a very good scout rush with Japanese, even though their light cavalry really does suffer by the time you get to the end of the game. And I think that's what you want to think about with the scout light cavalry Hussar. You tend to see it a lot more early in games and later in games. And so we are weighting those two times in the game. There are some exceptions. Turk and Indian light cav can be seen pretty frequently in the mid game. Maybe a few other civilizations as well, such as Slavs. But in general, those are kind of exceptions to the rule. But I would say don't be afraid to use some of the D-tier civilizations, say Britain light cav, Japanese light cav, and also say think about, right, even some of the A-tier civilizations. Look at Mongols, right? If you're going up against a lot of archers, you might want to think twice about Mongol Hussars. So think about the matchups as you go throughout the game. Again, Something I might have said at the outset, but if I didn't, I'm saying it now. These are obviously just my opinion. If you have a disagreement, go ahead, leave a comment, disagreement in the comment section below. And if you agree, hey, feel free to do that too. I love hearing from you. And with that, we're going to go ahead in the tier list. And so I will see you in the next one.